Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me today, Roger Grimes, for the best ways to stop malware and ransomware that no one else will tell you. I am Roger Grimes, data-driven defense evangelist. For KnowBe4, I've been doing computer security for 33 years now. I've written 12 books on computer security and over 1,000 magazine articles. I was the InfoWorld and CSO weekly security columnist from 2005 to 2019. That's where a lot of those articles came from. There are some of my books. The latest one that's just coming out now is Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication. I work for KnowBe4. We're the world's largest security awareness training vendor. But today we're here to talk about the best ways to stop malware. And before I do that, I want to remind anyone some housekeeping that if you're having any problems seeing or hearing anything, try refreshing your browser or opening and closing it again. That usually fixes it 99% of the time. And yes, the most common question we probably get is that the slides will be available to you after the presentation is done. And certainly submit your questions in the question area so that I can try to answer them with the remaining minutes at the end of the talk. But today, I want to talk about the 2 best ways to stop malware, step-by-step instructions on how to do it. I've written about it before, but I've never demonstrated it. I've never talked about it. This is my first time, and I think it's when I have shared what to do and how to do and why to do it, it's always been a big hit when I've showed people. I'm going to show you how to do it, and we're even going to have a demonstration of me launching malware and seeing how my particular recommendation works. But the big key behind it is the 2 best ways to stop malware involves detecting and mitigating how malware is breaking in. That's really strange. Most people actually don't know that. They don't, if you get an antivirus report that tells you of all the malware that it detected and removed, it never contains the how. It doesn't tell you whether it was social engineering or unpatched software or misconfiguration or eavesdropping or whatever it is, which is really strange because if you're trying to stop something from breaking into you, if you don't know how it broke in, you can't stop it. It would be like as if your house was being broken into all the time by criminals when you weren't there, but you weren't sure, are they breaking in through the doors? Are they breaking in through the windows? If you don't know how something is breaking in, you can't as effectively address it. So number one, if I want to stop malware, I have to detect how the malware is breaking in. And again, then we'll talk about the 10 ways that it can break in and then mitigate those methods. And then number 2, try to detect how long the malware has been broken in before it was detected and removed and where it was. They call that dwell time. The real risk to you is, if malware comes in, gets detected and immediately removed, it's coming to you through a website or something like that, and the anti-malware software detects and removes it, really you are not at risk, right? There is no big harm done to your system, no ability for that malware to harm your system. But sometimes, and a lot of people may or may not know this, sometimes the malware is in your system for days, hours, days, sometimes months. I think the average ransomware program is now in people's environment up to 8 months. Before it kind of goes off and starts doing its little ransomware thingy. So many times malware is dwelling inside somebody's system and not being detected, and that's where the majority of the risk is. So I'm going to talk about how to teach you to do these 2 things, and what I teach you here, you can probably implement in a day in your environment, which is to detect and mitigate how malware is breaking in, and then detect how long it's breaking in for, how long it's dwelling, and where it was dwelling before it got detected. So we're going to learn about the how, the why, the where, and how long related to malware, and then try to get early detection of it all. If you have these clues, you can help stop malware, future malware, from breaking into your system. And unfortunately, no anti-malware defense is going to tell you this. Most of them can't tell you it, and it's really not to their benefit to tell you. Like, I don't think any antivirus program, endpoint detection program, EDR, I don't think they want to tell you how long the malware was dwelling before they detected it, right? If they were to, every week or every day, every month, you can print a report showing you all the malware programs that were removed, but I don't think it's to their benefit to tell you how long it was in your systems, even if they could tell you, before they removed it. And really, that, again, is one of the most important pieces of information. So these things are things that your antivirus programs can't tell you or wouldn't tell you if they could tell you. but I'm going to tell you how to do it today, how you can implement it. How malware is breaking in is officially known as the initial root cause exploit or root cause exploit or initial exploit, some combination of that phrase. Because you cannot stop malware if you don't stop how it's breaking in. One of the biggest problems in most security defenses is defenders don't focus enough on the root causes of how things break in. And again, if you don't focus on how things are breaking in, you can't stop things from breaking in. Malware and hackers can use 10 different methods. These are the 10 methods here, the initial root cause exploits. I've been keeping this list for over 30 years. I've updated it. I've renamed things. I've added stuff, deleted stuff. But as far as I know, every type of hacking mechanism and every type of malware program that gets in your system, it gets there on a system or a device or your network one of these 10 ways. It could be a programming bug. Usually it is a unpatched, but there's a patch available, but someone hasn't patched it. And so it exploits it because it's an unpatched program, or it could be a 0-day where a patch is not available. Those do show up a few times a year, but they don't ever get exploited that much. Social engineering, certain very, very popular way, email and website social engineering, and then increasingly voice phone phishing and SMS phishing. Could be an authentication attack. That would be something like maybe they're guessing at passwords, or they're trying to intercept the challenge response of a handshake and trying to determine the password hash or pass the hash attacks. Could be human error, misconfiguration, somebody allowed overly permissive permissions. That's a very popular attack type these days, overly permissive permissions, especially on AWS storage buckets. They seem to get at least the bulk of the press. It could be because of eavesdropping. Someone breaks in and listens on a wireless network and captures passwords. It could be because of data network traffic malformation. That would be like a denial of service attack or something like that, or a buffer overflow. Could be an insider attack, trusted insiders doing wrong. Could be a third-party reliance issue where the attacker broke into a vendor or some other dependency or contractor, or your programmers got captured by a watering hole attack or something like that. Could be a physical attack where they just steal your device or steal your hard drive or steal your USB key, or some brand new attack vector that you don't even know about. But what I'll challenge you is, can you name the number one, number two ways that malware and hackers break into your environment? And by that I mean, even the malware, even if it's only in there for a minute or 3 minutes or a day, can you name the most common way that malware gets into your environment before it gets detected and removed? And if you don't know that answer, you should know that answer. That is one of the keys of having a really good defense, what I call the data-driven defense. I wrote a book on it called Data-Driven Computer Defense, sold over 30,000 copies. But what it talks about is that if you want to stop malware and hackers from breaking in, you need to figure out what are the top couple of ways that things break into your environment and start to mitigate those. I've been doing computer security for 33 years, but only about 20 of those years did I do security analysis and security response and incident response. So for 20 of those years, I was helping people many times after they'd been hacked or hacked multiple times, or I did security reviews. And when I looked at how these companies were most likely to be exploited or how they were actually exploited, what I found in every case is that there was always a number one cause. There was always some way that was much larger than all the others for the reason why they were being broken into. And then there was a number one and sometimes a number three way. And then everything else added up all together only came to like 1 to 10% of the risk. So let me say that again. In most organizations, there is a number one most impactful exploit, root cause threat, and maybe a second one. And everything else typically added up all together only accounted for 10% of the risk. Like one year, I remember, I think it was 2007, unpatched Oracle Java was responsible by itself for 91% of all web exploits on the internet. Just one unpatched program, if patched, would have gotten rid of 91% of the exploits. Well, if you don't know what your biggest initial breach root cause is for most companies, it is social engineering for most companies, followed by unpatched software. They're the number one and number two way and have been for decades. Since I got into computer security in 1987, it used to be that unpatched software is the number one way. That changed right after Java for about 9 years was the number one. Unpatched Java was the number one way that things got in and broke in. That ended about 2009, and since then, then it's been social engineering. And social engineering is responsible for 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches. Followed by 20 to 40% of it is due to unpatched software, and sometimes, of course, they're together. But those two things account, social engineering and unpatched software account for 90 to 99% of the risk in most organizations. But I don't want to say, don't trust me. I work for a company that's trying to sell you anti-social engineering software and services. You should measure your own risk, and that's what I'm going to help you do today. You don't want to listen to some other expert or some other report or something tell you, what is the number one way your company gets compromised the most. And again, when I mean compromised, I mean even if the malware is only in your environment for minutes or 3 hours or 3 days, because that's the risk to your environment, or hacker or whatever. How did they get in there? You need to know that answer. I'm going to teach you how to know that answer today. Social engineering, very, very popular, again, 70 to 90%. And it can come to you many different ways. It can be an email attack. It can be a compromised website. That's very, very common. I've seen a couple of them just this morning. It can be compromised banner ads, where the banner ads are being switched up by some ad agency and they're infected. Could be SMS messaging on your phone. See a lot of those these days, although they tend to be more spam than phishing, but I'm seeing a little bit of both. Instant messaging certainly is where a lot of that sort of stuff comes about. We're seeing a big rise in vishing, which is voice call phishing, where someone calls you and pretends to be Microsoft or some vendor looking for a payment. And of course, social engineering could be in person, right? Although I always say the number one way to stop to help your coworkers, yourself and your coworkers from being compromised, is to help them how to tell the difference between legitimate URLs and rogue URLs. And I've written an article on it. I've got a webinar. I've got a PDF poster you can email me for at rogerg@knowbefore.com. But the number one way that you can help educate yourself and end users in staying away from phishing attacks is to help them spot those bad rogue URLs. Number one skill I would teach anybody. Teach my kids that. For patching, the most commonly attacked unpatched software is browser add-ins. So that's, Flash, so it used to be Oracle, Java, and Sun Java, then in Flash, and then Adobe Reader, and those still are popularly attacked. Network advertising services, or daemons in Linux is what they're called. That would be things like remote desktop protocol. Those are the services that you can remotely touch. They need to be, connected to. Those need to be patched. It could be the operating system. Although for a long time, for about 12 years, the operating system dropped out of the top 10 reasons why you might be attacked successfully, but it's entered back in there. Productivity apps, especially Microsoft Office with rogue, Office documents, rogue PDF documents, things like that. On the server side, the most commonly attacked software, successfully commonly attacked, is web server software, the operating system software, database software, and management software. That's very, very common. The management software, that'd be like your RDP or your VNC, or in the old days called Compact Insight Manager, or it could be your VPN software. Travelex got taken down by ransomware that broke in through the VPN. Experian a long time ago, that was one of the biggest attacks. That got taken down by, they hadn't patched Apache struts. But those are the things that you need to patch. Although a lot of times in any given day or month, you can run, say, show me the top exploited vulnerabilities. And this is a list that I ran recently, and I was kind of surprised because this list did not match up with the most commonly attacked things, and some of the stuff is really weird. Although I do see Apache struts down there. Number 6, I guess, is very popular since it broke into Experian. But look at number 1. The number 1 thing, my MV Power DVR remote control. I would have never thought that DVR devices would be the most attacked thing. Said it was impacted 40%. Something like that, or 45%. Yeah, the MV, if you look at the top sentence there, it's the number 1 attack thing. 45% of organizations globally got attacked by that, and that, that's bound to be some IoT attacking bot that's trying to use it in a denial of, make a botnet and then denial of service attack. But if I was you, I would make sure that I have my workstations fully patched, especially browser add-ins in the browser, network advertising daemons, operating system, productivity application servers. I do web server, operating system, database software, management software, and then I would run my top 10 list and just go, hey, what's being most popularly attacked this month, and make sure I was fully patched on that. And then you want to determine, though, how that malware gets in, right? So even if it's that DVR or break-in or something like that, how does it get in? Is it because of unpatched software or social engineering, or, what is it? How does it get in there? Usually the only way that most people know is if they're actually on their computer, they're doing something, all of a sudden the antivirus software, anti-malware software, the endpoint detection remediation software kicks off and goes, oh, we detected this virus or Trojan or whatever trying to come through your system. So a lot of times the only way that most people know about how malware is breaking in is if they get alert right in the middle of it, which doesn't always occur. Some software doesn't even put up alerts these days, so maybe it's just in a log file somewhere. But a lot of times it can be difficult to know, but I'm going to teach you how to know better of how malware is breaking in, because remember, that's one of the two most important things you can do is determine how malware is breaking in so you can stop it from breaking in by mitigating one of those 10 ways or two of those 10 ways. So the first thing I tell people is know that most malware, 99.999%, I'm just making that up, but let's say most malware only breaks in using one method, and usually it's social engineering. You can actually create methods that detect or track the first execution and where. And we're going to talk about how to do that today, where you can actually get a report saying, oh, this thing broke in, this is the software it was involved in the workstation of the person, and you can track and find out how it broke in. You can certainly look at your log files, and I'll help you create some new log files today that will be very good at it. Sometimes all it takes is a little bit of research. 45 minutes or an hour of research can give you a wealth of information. But I tell people sometimes all you got to do is ask the end user. Like you can do, it sounds crazy, especially in a large environment, but when someone gets malware that's in their system, sometimes you can go to the end user and go, hey, yeah, how do you think that you got compromised? And the person will go, I was looking at a YouTube video. My friend sent me a YouTube video and said I needed to download a codec, and I noticed my computer got slow after I downloaded the video codec, and you're like, yeah, that was a Trojan. But, when in doubt, you can many times just ask the end user to tell you how they think they were broken into. Or as a last resort, you can track by inventory. And what I mean by that is almost everybody has a software hardware inventory. If not, you should have one. And every time you track that a system was compromised by malware or a hacker, you should ask yourself, what was the configuration of that system? And what you'll find out if you run those sort of queries is that there are certain combinations of software that seem to be affiliated with higher rates of viruses and malware and exploitation. You're like, oh, I know it's this Windows 10 Service Pack 1 or whatever they call patches these days, and it looks like, they were running Microsoft Edge or Chrome or Adobe Acrobat. But if you have no other way of knowing, hey, what seems to be the way that malware is breaking in, run a software hardware inventory and see if there's commonalities. Typically, you will find commonalities, and it's actually how I discovered a decade or so ago, more than that Oracle Java was like the common thread between most of the break-ins into the company that I was in at the time, because I did a software inventory of all these systems that were broken in, and one by one I realized it was unpatched Java was kind of the common thread, and we started to focus on that and get rid of it, and we significantly decreased malware in our organization. So remember this again, most malware only breaks in using one method, usually social engineering, usually coming through email and or compromised websites. They get an email or a URL, or they click on a website and it's compromised, and then it sends them some type of malicious JavaScript. It can also be unpatched internet-facing software, so unpatched browser, unpatched Adobe Acrobat, Flash, something like that. Could be password guessing. In the ransomware world, password guessing is somewhat more popular. Although most of the time when they're trying to guess the passwords, I see that they also look to see if RDP is fully patched. So there is kind of an increase in this password guessing. And you don't have to have long, complex passwords. You just need not to have a password that's password or QWERTY or something like that. I think when they do password guessing, they only guess like 100 times against each user account, maybe 101 or something like that. So as long as your password isn't ridiculously simple, you should be protected. A lot of malware, most malware, comes from what's called exploit kits, and you can literally look up those exploit kits kits and find out what vulnerabilities they're typically attacking. Chrome or Internet Explorer or Adobe Acrobat or Flash or something like that. They have particular exploits that they will try, and you can see, do those exploits, do they live in my environment? Excuse me for another drink there. But if nothing else, just do a little research. If you have, let's say you get a list, you run your antivirus report, and it lists the top 10 or 20 or 30 malware programs that's identified and removed. If there's nothing else, you can use that report and then do, 45 minutes, an hour and a half of research and find out how most of the stuff is breaking in. So I'm going to use an example antivirus vendor report showing the top 10 programs it's identified globally in the world, but you should use your own report. But in this case, I'm going to use a Checkpoint report. So this is Checkpoint's top 10 report of the different malware programs that are breaking in: Agent Tesla or Morpheus, XMRig, and DryX, and TrickBot. TrickBot's still in a lot of passwords and different things. A lot of these things are related to ransomware, but this is Checkpoint's global top 10. But I'm going to assume that you've run your personal antivirus monthly report to get your top 10 or top 20 programs, and then you can do research. Now, I'm going to do it, say, for an example, here was the top 10 programs that the Checkpoint report had, and I'm just going to make up some, hey, this is how much we detected in our organization. Typically, the top 10 or 20 programs account for almost all of the malware programs that are detected in a particular month, so I just made up some percentages and plugged them in here for our example fake organization. And then you just go do research. So then you start to Bing and Google Agent Tesla. And I looked up, and it's like, oh, Agent Tesla is delivered by email attachments. And if I look down in the below, it says recent Agent Tesla campaigns have exploited Microsoft Office vulnerabilities. So it looks like it's arriving, that they're probably Microsoft Word documents or something arriving in an email attachment. So I would write that down. Hey, it's social engineering because it's arriving via email, and unpatched Microsoft Office because typically Microsoft patches everything they know about pretty quickly, certainly within a month. And then you just do that for all the other programs, right? So, there's Agent Tesla, and there's Morpheus, or however you say it. I can't pronounce stuff like that very well, XMRig, and so on. I just went through and in 45 minutes found how most of these programs, these are how they break in. Like if you find XMRig, it is usually unpatched web server software, but a lot of it is social engineering and spam and so on. So we just, again, I'm even saying for Ramit, we don't know. Sometimes when you research something, they just don't tell you how it breaks in. I naturally assume it's going to be social engineering, but sometimes you just don't know, so you just pull it out. But then you do a little bit of research. And if I use those figures that I just showed you, about 74% of those top 10 malware programs in this example related to social engineering one way or another. There was another 3 to 5% that were unknown from that Ramit program that I couldn't figure out, and that's 74% is related to social engineering. If you fully patched things, if you didn't fully patch stuff, and you hadn't fully patched Office, let's say, or the web server software, well, we could attribute up to 48% of the risk to unpatched software. But literally in 45 minutes, I was able to figure out, using that top 10 list, that 74% of it likely arrives via social engineering. But there was also some USB key in there. There was some network share issues and some stuff I couldn't determine. Once you determine which are the top ways that things break in, you want to try to create new policies and procedures and technical controls that prevent that stuff from breaking in. So you want to use a combination of policies that you write down and teach people, technical controls like your firewalls, antivirus, and and intrusion detection and all that sort of stuff, and education to try to prevent those things from happening. Then if one of them gets by, you want early detection of that thing getting by, and then you want fast and quick incident response and recovery. So for every single control pillar that you find, I just nicknamed this the 3x3 or maybe 3 cubed or something like that, security control pillars. You want to use the best combination of policy, technical controls and education you can to prevent, detect, and remove a threat that has gotten through your system. Again, it only did to research Checkpoint's top 10 report. Took me 45 minutes and a little bit of math, add, subtract, multiply, divide. You should use your own anti-malware reports. Try your best to determine the root cause exploit based upon the evidence. If you have it, again, you can interview people, you can look at your logs, but if nothing else, just use your own malware, your own malware reports, the list of the names, and do 45 minutes of researching. And if you don't know, and let me say, and I've been doing this for 33 years, is that most of the time it's social engineering and unpatched software, and has been that way for over 3 decades. It's unusual when it's not those things, but it could be. And although you always want to kind of keep track of it, because you don't always want to say that, it can be social engineering and unpatched software so much that you're going to, after years, be tempted not to look every month, but you will then miss the increasing trends. Like when Conficker, years ago, Conficker started to show up. It was one of the first major USB key exploitation things. Some ransomware only comes in on USB key as well, or that new MVP-powered DVR exploit that I've never heard of in my life. So the idea is that you always want to track what is the malware in your environment, how it's getting in, track it over month to month, and keep track of the trends over time, so that, like when Conficker came out, I remember laughing at Conficker. I'm like, it had like 5 different ways it could break in. One of them was USB key, and I thought, who in the world's being exploited with that? Well, it turns out tens of millions of people around the world. So a little thing oftentimes become a big thing. Excuse me, and if you're tracking it, then you'll know what it, you can figure out what's a growing trend that you need to pay more attention to. And certainly to stop social engineering, we're big fans of testing people. You should always educate your employees to stop phishing, give them anti-phishing education, and you should do that at least once a month, along with at least once a month simulated phishing. So you do the education once a month, you do the simulated phishing at least once a month, maybe once a week for the simulated phishing as part of your training. And if you do that, we know for sure that you will significantly reduce the risk of what people will click on. So if you educate them, simulated phish them, our average customer goes from a baseline, what's called a phish prone rate, that's the number of people that will click on a phish, from almost 38% down to under 5% a year later. And that's not, the best companies. That's all companies that follow our advice, which is to do anti-phishing training and simulated phishing at least once a month, if not more. So make sure you get on that. But again, more importantly, so even if we know how it breaks in, you want to know how long it dwells and where it's dwelling. The antivirus report can tell you where it detected and where it removed it, but it can't tell you how long it was there before it removed it, and that's where most of the risk is. Most of the risk that's presented to you is where something is, where it first broke in, where it went after it broke on in, and then how long it was there before it got detected and removed. And again, I think a lot of people are shocked to know that antivirus software and that sort of stuff, oftentimes it takes days. The average anti-malware program can take many days. And if you ever want to test this, you can go to VirusTotal, virustotal.com. That's owned by Google. It has like 75 antivirus engines in there. And anytime you detect a malware program and you submit it to VirusTotal, I mean, it's really routine for a lot of antivirus engines, certainly early on when malware is brand new, not to show it for hours to days. Almost any malware program I submit to VirusTotal is only detected by, 30, 40, maybe on the outside, 70, 80% of the antivirus engines. And VirusTotal will not even tell you which antivirus engines are most accurate, because the antivirus engine people, vendors, don't want to tell you. So in order for VirusTotal to run those different antivirus engines, they can't tell you. They'll show you if you submit malware, they'll tell you which ones have malware, or which things you submit to VirusTotal are detected as malware and which antivirus engines detect it, but they won't tell you that across the entire population of malware. So all these antivirus vendors are telling you, oh, we're 100% accurate, and it's a lie. It always has been a lie. It's never been true that they detect 100% of stuff, but I can help you detect a lot more of it and figure out how long was it dwelling before, and where it was dwelling before it got removed. That's what we're going to focus on next. And the trick to it is to use an application control program and monitor audit only mode. Application control programs are frequently known as whitelisting programs or blacklisting programs, where, you know, if it's a whitelisting program, you can say only allow these programs to run. If it's a blacklisting program, you can say allow any program to run but these programs. They're known as application control programs. They've been around for decades. There's free ones in Windows since Windows XP back in the day, and there's ones in Linux and things like that. But what I tell people, enable an application control program in audit-only mode. Take a clean snapshot. So snapshot, most of them, not all of them, most of them allow you to kind of take this quick, clean snapshot of a baseline of what that computer or device looks like before any possible malware gets on it. And then you can look in the logs for the exceptions, like what's been executed, launched, or installed since you took the snapshot. And then copy every time there's a new execution that was not in the baseline. So every time someone installs a new program, every time there's a new execution or new DLL loaded or something like that, you pull that event to some type of centralized database. And then whenever antivirus detects and removes malware, that creates an event. You copy it to the same database, and you compare the removal time of that malicious software from the time that it originally executed, its origination time. That's the key. And then create reports and security workflows from this information. So I'll show you kind of how we do it. I'll give you an example and a real life demo of it. But again, you want to start with an application program, whitelist or blacklisting program, but you want to put it in audit-only mode or monitoring mode. You don't want to do blocking enforcement unless you really know what you're doing. Actually, the ultimate security would be if you could actually put it in blocking and enforcement. That's really tough to do because everybody wants to be able to be free and run everything. But if you can put it in blocking enforcement mode, great. But that takes a whole bunch of planning, testing, senior management report. If you put it in an audit-only mode, people won't even notice. So I've done this program, I'm getting ready to tell you, I've done this in many companies, and the end users never even know it's turned on. It doesn't bother them in the least. But again, you want to, if you can, hopefully the application control program has an ability to snapshot the system and build the rules for you, because let me tell you, it's a pain if you have to build the rules manually yourself. And then again, most of these application control programs will write events to your security logs when new executions occur that are not on the baseline. Or like with Windows App Locker, it writes all executions to the log, but you can look for particular event log numbers and pull out just the ones that indicate, new events happening. So here's some example programs. Windows, since I think Windows 7 and above has had App Locker. I thought Windows Vista had it, but I think everything I'm reading lately says App Locker was only on Windows 7 and above. Windows 10 has Windows Defender application control. It used to be called something else, and I forget the name of it right now, but it was, I guess the Windows Defender is kind of their common branding these days. So App Locker has been on Windows 7 and above. Windows Defender application control program's been on Windows 10 and above. Enterprise versions only, I think. Most antivirus programs, Symantec and McAfee and all those stuff, and Bitdefender and stuff like that, most of them have a version, an application control program that you can run. There's commercial versions out there, a bunch of them. I love Beyond Trust. I love Carbon Black. Carbon Black bought the one that I loved the most, which was Bit9 Parity a bunch of years ago. That used to be, I haven't seen it in a lot of years since Carbon Black bought it, but that used to be the one back when I worked for Microsoft that I used to love, and I was trying to talk Microsoft into buying them, but it didn't happen. Tripwire has been around forever, and that runs on Linux and other types of systems. Cisco has a program, Avanti. There's a bunch of commercial versions out there that do application control. So get your hands on one, although it's built in on Windows by default. If you have enterprise versions, Linux has some versions. SE Linux has one built in. AppArmor, you can use it. The FA Policy D daemon can do it. Let me just say that the open source versions are they're not really great application control programs. They're not nearly as friendly, almost like all things Linux. But you know, those things, there they are. You can use them. I would, if I was on Linux or Apple or something like that, I would try to run a commercial version or something, or I would try to use something besides what's built into Linux itself. No, it's just not that good. Or the open source versions, that is. If you're interested into application whitelisting altogether, NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, has put out a really good guide called Special Publication 800-167, the Guide to Application Whitelisting. It's a really short guide, which is unusual for NIST. I think it's maybe 8 or 10 pages long, but it just tells you, hey, this is how, if you're going to do application whitelisting, this is what we recommend. This is how you should roll it out. And it really is a very quick read if you're interested in it. I'm going to concentrate on AppLocker just because it's the one I've been using for a decade or however long it's been. So AppLocker has been in since Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008. Before that, in XP and Server 2003, it used to be called Software Restriction Policies. So now it's called AppLocker. And again, there is this other version called Windows Defender Application Control that's in Windows 10. Just realize that Windows Defender Application Control is a really it is application control on steroids. It's really, really good, but it's so good that it really can crush your computer. So you want to be, I can put AppLocker in audit-only mode and never cause a problem. Windows Defender is not necessarily that case, but if you really want to lock down your system with that blocking or enforcement mode, Windows Defender Application Control is really the way you want to do it. But you really want to read some guides, some really good guides out there for AppLocker and Windows Defender Application Controls by Aaron Margosis, and I'll show you a tool of his or a website of his later on. But just remember that AppLocker is not a true security boundary, but Windows Defender Application Control is, and that just means Microsoft is not warranting that a program or a virus or a Trojan can't break the AppLocker whitelisting, blacklisting boundary. But in this case, we don't care because we're doing monitoring only. And there are for sure documented ways on the internet to bypass AppLocker without getting detected, even for what I'm telling you to do. But I've not seen any software do that in real life. But if you're worried about that sort of stuff, you're worried about exceptions and bypasses, use Windows Defender Application Control instead after you do your research and testing. But for our purposes today, AppLocker is good enough. You can install AppLocker on standalone computers, use group policy to do it across an Active Directory network, or across, you can use mobile device management or Microsoft Intune or something like that to configure and enable it across many different devices. So I'm going to give an example of it, how it runs here. We're going to start. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do, and then I'll do a demo of it using real malware. But I'm going to do it on a standalone machine. In this case, if I was on a standalone Windows 10 machine, I would run gpedit.msc that brings up the local group policy editor. I would open up the local computer policy versus local user policy, do computer configuration, security settings, then application control policies. When you do that, it'll bring up the AppLocker section and it has 4 different types of rules. There's executable rules, Windows installer rules, which is kind of cool because you can kind of block or allow many different programs that are installed by the same installer, or you can block or allow scripts, or you can block or allow particular packaged applications that are not Windows installers but just packaged applications from other application installers. And the package application rules apply to what Microsoft means modern apps, and they're a lot more secure apps. Well, there used to be another name for that, but now they're modern apps. That's Microsoft's term for kind of like apps that are locked in a sandbox on the system. But you can enable or disable these and the rules for them separately. We're just going to mess around with the executable rules mostly today for today's demo. But again, if I wanted to, I'm in Group Policy Editor. If I right-click on AppLocker, if I had an existing policy, I could import that policy. I'm going to do that in my demo today. But usually you would choose Properties here. It would list the different types of rules. You get executable rules, installer rules, and so on. It'll bring up and give you all 4 categories. You can click and enable the configured, and you can enforce rules or just do audit only. We're just going to say, okay, I'm going to enable all 4 of these types of rules, but I'm going to do audit only. And again, you don't want to do enforcement blocking mode unless you really know what you're doing. So then I choose that. And then what I want to do is snapshot it. Now, snapshotting is called snapshotting in some of the application programs, but in AppLocker, it's called automatically generate rules. You can one by one create your rules, but I don't like to do that. I want it to snapshot my clean machine before I hand it out to the end user. And it says at the top there, it says, what groups will these rules apply to? You want to make sure it says everyone. A lot of times it will say not to admins, but you want it to be to everyone by default, especially when we're just doing audit-only mode. And then it starts by default saying we're going to look at everything under C:\program files. We're like, no, we want to do everything on the C drive and the C root directory, so change it to that. Give it another name, like I'm calling this one baseline rules. If I had multiple hard drives I wanted to monitor, maybe I'd do a D:, an E:, an F:, whatever it is, number of virtual drives that I might have. And then Microsoft's going to say, hey, what type of rules do you want? Do you want publisher rules for files that are digitally signed? Yeah, I like that. That way it just uses digital certificates. Then it will, by default, use file hash. It will use the hash of the file, the SHA-2 hash of the file. I think it used to be MD5 and then SHA-1, and now I hope it's SHA-2. But that's good. You can also use path rules, but that means like it allows or denies files based upon the path they're in. In a malware file, a lot of times they're just going in a Windows system, and it's going to allow anything in that folder to run anyways. Or if you don't allow Windows system files to run, then your whole system crashes. So you usually don't want to do path rules. Usually you want to do file hash rules. And then I'm telling it reduce the number of rules created by grouping similar files together. That's if it has like commonalities. Although when you're doing file hashing and things like that, it normally doesn't reduce the number of rules that much. Then you say next. And then you generate the rules. On a typical system, I would say this takes somewhere between 1 or 2 minutes to generate all the rules. On a VM system, it may take 2 to 3 or even 5 minutes or something like that. When you get through on a brand new Windows system, brand new, free, clean, I did this on Windows Sandbox, which is really clean. It said, oh, you've got 2598, almost 2,600 rules. And then I'm going to say create and make those rules. It's asking me, do I want to create the default rules? I'm going to say no here, but what the default rules basically say, don't apply these rules to the administrators, which if you're doing enforcement, that may be what you want to do, because if you don't do that, sometimes the administrator can't even log into the machine if you haven't set up the right rules. You can really hose yourself. But in this case, we're going to say, no, I don't want to make any exceptions, because we're doing audit-only mode, and I want AppLocker to audit things even if they're running in the admin or local admin or domain admin security credentials. That's where a lot of people get infected with malware, and it tries to infect or pass the hash attack their way through the domain admins. So again, we're going to say no if we see that. We don't want to create exceptions. And then you'll have your 2,600 rules listed there. If you've got an OEM version, you probably have like 36 or 4,600 rules there, because OEMs always put a bunch of junk on your system. And of course, all of your company software, it is not unusual for me to see 10,000 rules that have all the software, that's on an image that you put on your systems or you get from your vendors. But then it's almost ready to go. You just, we have to enable one service to enable this. So we would start what's called the application identity service. I don't know why it's not called the AppLocker service, because that's really what it is. But you want to, I do services.msc, pull up the services on Windows, and then tell it to start the application identity service or app, but they call it App ID as well. Matter of fact, I see that in a lot of technical documents. They'll say start the App ID service, and it's not called its short name is App ID, but you don't see that anywhere unless I guess you could do the command line and use App ID. But anyways, it's the application identity service application. Then you want to go open the event log, event viewer locally, and what you'll see if you've just brand new done it, turned on and enabled AppLocker on a brand new machine, and you go look in the event log, and you have the event logs on Windows. Of course, you got like 100 of them. So you go to event viewer, you go Windows log, then you go to applications and services logs, then you go to the Microsoft log, then you go to the Windows log, and then you'll find the AppLocker log, and then you'll have different logs for different types, whether it's executables versus Microsoft installer versus the package modern apps or whatever. But what what you'll notice here is that the number of events in all of them are 0 right now. What it's on a brand new system if you haven't run anything, but pretty soon we'll run stuff and see that it has something. So just in the demo that I'm getting ready to show you, I went to a website called malshare.com. If you don't know about malshare.com, it's got thousands, tens of thousands of malware programs, live stuff. If you go there, be careful. Let your network security folks know that you go there. Otherwise, you'll be setting off alarms everywhere, and you could get in trouble. You could get fired, so make sure you have permission to go there. But basically, you have to give them your email address to get an API key, and with that API key, you can download any malware sample that you want to. In this case, I'm going to tell Malshare, I want to search for ransomware. I do this all the time. I download and run ransomware all the time, almost every week, and I look at the different names that are there. You'll see all kinds of popular ransomware. This is real ransomware stuff. You should not run it unless it's on a virtual machine or something like that. But I'm going to download and find Cryptic. The reason why I chose Cryptic in this demo is that it's an executable. Some of the other stuff's a DLL or something, or it doesn't execute right. Almost all of it is almost always malware. But just for demo purposes, I like to find what's called a portable executable 32 or 64, which tells me it's a regular executable. I can run it and it will work for my demo. But essentially, when you go to Malshare, you search on something, it will then give you a bunch of file hashes, MD5, SHA-1 hashes. You need to copy one of them. If you do download, you're just going to get the hashes. But you want to copy at least one of the hashes, and then you can go tell it that you want to pool that particular hash, and then it will give you a malware program. It names it after the hash that you submitted. You really probably want to rename it, make sure you rename it as malware or something like that. So I downloaded it and I called it Cryptic Ransomware. I intentionally misspelled it a little bit because I just wanted to make sure I didn't overwrite any previous copies I had. I put it on the desktop in my demo. So there's Cryptic Ransomware, and then I ran it. The first time I ran it, Windows said, hey, this could be a bad thing. You sure you want to run it? And what it really said is it didn't say it was malware. It just said that it was an unknown publisher. That was really why it flagged it. But it was nice. I was kind of glad that Windows Smart Screen Defender kind of blocked it, but I'm going to say run it anyway. I would say that, probably a third to half of the malware that I download from Malshare is not detected by any antivirus or at least the antiviruses that I'm running at the time, but pretty soon they all start to detect it. And if you run it, a lot of times I'll download it with Google Chrome. It tends to allow me to download more stuff, and Windows Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge tend to block malware a lot more. So I use Google Chrome to download stuff. And then I ran the malware program, and I ran it to death. And this is one, Cryptic is one of those that kind of goes off right away. It actually tries to install TrickBot or something like that in memory. It tries to collect a bunch of passwords and send them across the internet. So make sure wherever you test or run malware, if you do, that you don't use your real login names or passwords. And then it gives me a little, ransom thing here telling me it wants my Bitcoins. I did this all in Windows Sandbox. I'll show you the demo in a minute. And I could see even after I ran it, there was a new program running. I ran auto runs, and I found there was this new program that was installed under Program Data Windows CRSS.exe. That's it's got the same name as a real Windows file, but that runs under System 32, and they were calling themselves the Beta Results Mega Pump Rhetoric or something like that, and saying the publisher was from Facebook. So that must have been their campaign there, but you see it's not verified because it did not have a digital signature. I ran sysinternals. Auto runs and sysinternals are free utilities you can download from sysinternals.com, which is owned by Microsoft. But I could also see that when I ran the Cryptic Ransomware, it told me that 58 of the 72 running antivirus engines now detected that as malware, so it was really malware for sure. But the big thing is I went into my app locker log and I saw there was what's called an 8003 error message saying, hey, this was a program, this Cryptic Ransomware was allowed to run but would have been prevented. So this is the big thing. This is where you're getting your date and your time to put in the database, and also the user and the computer that it ran on that you can use in your security workflow. So essentially, basically, collect all your app locker 803 events, which are those exceptions to the snapshotting. These are the exception events that would not be in the snapshot. You put them to a centralized database, take your antivirus program logs, put it to a centralized database, and then use some logic. And every time your antivirus program finds malware, tell it to check and see where on when the first execution was of that malware program on that computer. So every time you find it, you compare the antivirus detection program to the first execution date, and you can create your malware dwell time of how long it was on the system living before it got detected and removed, and then develop security workflows like send an automated email to victims letting them know that you found malware and that it had been there for 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days. Maybe they can try to communicate what applications they used, why they were exploited, or what personal logins they used. Did they go to their banking websites and stuff? A lot of my customers, I tell them, make an automated email that comes from IT that goes, hey, we found some malware on your system at this time in this date, and it was alive for this long. We're going to have to clean your desktop or re-image it or whatever, but you need to think about all the systems you went into, because they could have stolen all your passwords and all your credentials and stuff like that. So you can create reports of long dwell times, how long stuff lived, if it was on super sensitive people's workstations like the CISO or the CISO or something like that, and then figure out an average dwell time, and figure out over time, does the dwell time grow or get smaller? And again, then tie back, more importantly, how the malware got in to modify your training and defenses. So it's a really cool thing to see. I'm going to do the demo here, and we'll see if we can get the same thing to happen. We should be able to do it. So let's see how a real-life demonstration of AppLocker would work if you were to implement it. So you first have to start with enabling AppLocker and using gpedit.msc. Here, let me maximize this. The first thing you have to do is turn it on. You would do that by right-clicking AppLocker under Application Control Policies. Try that again. Here we go. And what you would do is say configure. You don't want to do audit only, configure, audit only, configure, audit only, configure, audit only. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then you want to create the executable rules, the generate, do a baseline. And what you can do is this automatically generate rules. This is going to, if I was to do it right now in the demo, it could take, because I'm running a virtual machine, it could take up to several minutes. It's far easier to just import a policy that you've already created. I have one that I've created, and you could do the same thing in real life. Once you've done it once, you can import the policy settings and rules to any other workstation. And it says, hey, I'm going to import the policy. It will permanently replace all existing policy rules. Yes, usually it tells me it adds 415 rules. If I go back into AppLocker, I'll see that it still has setting with rules or audit only. And if I go under executable rules, I now have 415 rules that are kind of the baseline for my machine. We then have to enable AppLocker. To do that, we have to turn on a service. If I can spell right, the app identity service, application identity service. I start that service, and now AppLocker is running. We can look in the event logs. I'll turn on event viewer. And we'll go look for the AppLocker log. And there's our AppLocker logs. You can kind of see in the experience that we don't have any events yet, so we're not going to get any events till we get exceptions to our rules. So now let's go generate some exceptions to our rules, to our AppLocker rules. I'm going to go to Malshare. This is a site. If you've never been there, you shouldn't go there if you haven't told your system administrator about it. This is a site that has tens of thousands of malware samples that anybody can run. It's updated all the time. Anybody could go to it. It's a place I go to just to get malware to do demonstrations. But you can find malware on it. It's called malshare.com. Again, make sure you get permission before you go there, because you can certainly cause sysadmins and security types to freak out and panic. But I'm going to look for ransomware. Always love to see what ransomware is out there these days that we can run. Here we go. So now we've got lots of ransomware back. Here's one called Cryptic. I can go to, and it will tell me
When you're doing demos of the malware, you try to find stuff that's executables and things like this. This is a ransomware that has a keylogger in it. It hooks Windows. It messes with your files. It messes with your registry. It steals passwords. But it's a PE, a portable executable 32. That just kind of lets me know it's an executable that I can easily execute for the demo. Then you have to request and download it from Malware. You do that by copying the key. So then I can pull a sample of that and run it. So I can submit and do my pull. It then has the malware sample here. I'll do a save as. It downloads it as a text document. I'm going to say, hey, this is cryptic ransomware. I misspell it just so I know that it's there. Here it is. It looks like a TXT, but it really is an executable. So I'll rename it. Oh. Got to tell it to show extensions so I can rename the extension correctly. Show the file extensions. There we go. Now I've got cryptic ransomware. Do a rename. And instead of it being a TXT, we'll call it an EXE since that's what it is. And again, we're going to look on the app locker event log here. I'm going to do a refresh. Many times I have to do refreshes on the event logs, but I've got some operations here of new. This is just telling me that it allowed certain executables to run. Those are fine. What we're looking for is 8003, which are the new things that showed up. 1802s are events that are just showing me stuff that was allowed to run, and that app locker policy got applied. So then we're going to run the cryptic ransomware now. It's running. Windows, in this case, is freaking out a little bit. I'm going to tell it to ignore it. I want to run it anyways. And it's actually cryptic ransomware is running around trying to collect my passwords on this virtual machine and doing all kinds of devious stuff before it locks me up. Cryptic ransomware is not one of those that takes a long time to encrypt. It does it fairly quickly. I'm going to refresh my event logs again. And we'll see an 8003 warning on here. And when I run it, it's like, oh, this cryptic ransomware executable was allowed to run, but would have been prevented from running if the app locker policy was enforced. So this is what you're looking for. You would pick up this 1830 event, take it to your centralized database server, and then when this ransomware finally got detected and removed by your antivirus or endpoint detection response program, you would then create some type of automated process or alerting. But it tells you when it launched, when it was logged. It just happened a few seconds ago or a minute ago, but this is you would record the computer that it was on, what user was running, and the time and date, and then compare that against what your anti-malware when it finally detected it, stopped it, and removed it. So that's really the keys to the whole kingdom, everybody.
Pretty wild. If you want any more information on any of the other stuff we offer, we have a great website. Go to know4.com/resources. Lots of ebooks, lots of cool tools. We update that usually once a quarter. Even got my cool 12 ways to hack two-factor authentication ebook on there. We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm going to try to answer some questions, but if I don't get to your question, feel free to email me at rogerg@know4.com, and I promise I'll answer you within 24 hours. So let's take a look here. Someone says, should App ID service be set to automatic or would be manually triggered every time you log on in? If I remember correctly, you have to set it to automatic, so that's a good point on the demo, but I can't remember. It may be that it gets triggered once you have the rule, but when in doubt, chicken out and make the App ID service automatic. It says, do I recommend turning on App Locker for all computers in an org? Absolutely. They asked us to degrade the performance, not anything noticeable. Every organization where I've ever implemented these tricks on, this app locker type monitoring only thing, it is no one's ever even noticed. Like when I tell people, hey, check your, turn on your services, you'll see we have an app locker. Look in your audit logs, you'll see app lockers on. They are shocked. Somebody asked, can you use app locker to Active Directory? Absolutely. How do you set it up? You set it up using group policies in Active Directory, or you can use some type of something like Intune. Somebody asked if you have Zone Alarm and WebRoot or Comodo, I can't say the word. Will that be enough? I don't know. I don't know what they, the idea is, do they have some type of application control program? And also remember, even with that app locker, you have to figure out how stuff is breaking in. It's very important that not only you detect how long it's dwelling, but how it's breaking in. So I would assume that Zone Alarm, WebRoot, and I can't say the word, it's crazy, is not enough. Somebody says, is Linux or Apple safer than Windows? They can all be hacked, but Linux and Apple are typically, they have less attacks against them by far, especially in the ransomware world, although Linux just got its, the Russians just moved one of their common ransomware programs over to Linux. Someone says there are application control programs available for Apple Macs. I don't know. I should know that. And I'm just going to guess that Apple maybe has one built in, but I just don't know. Let's see. Have I seen bad websites that have HTTPS with the S of N? Yes. 80% of all malicious websites now have HTTPS enabled. Let's see. I run ancillary services, TVs, etc., on a guest TV network, so doesn't have access to my other devices. Since you said these are very vulnerable, how do we use these connections to be safe? You should keep the IoT devices and stuff. For sure, you need to keep them as fully patched as you can. They're horribly insecure, though, so I don't know how you keep them super secure. Some people put them on their own network or VPN and put a firewall in front of them. That certainly is one of the best things you can do, is put them on a separate network. I like what you did by putting it on the guest network, but then make sure you password protect it, and enable, WPA2 and use digital certificates and put a firewall in front of it. That would be good. What would be your recommendation for managing app locker in a domain environment? Group policy. Group policy by far. The hardest thing is to create snapshots for different types of machines, because different people run different types of software on different types of machines. So the hardest thing is making sure you get different snapshots for the different types of machines. If you want to save yourself a lot of work and a lot of kind of false positive events, you just want a snapshot either every machine that you're putting out there, at least all the ones that are unique, so that you're not getting a bunch of 8003 exceptions when really it is just legitimate software. Someone is saying, you said AppLocker uses little resources, going to be recommended on a Windows server? Yes, absolutely. I recommend that they be on Windows servers more than anything else, even more than workstations, usually because workstation servers aren't being updated by software nearly as much as the workstations are. With that, I can see we're coming to the end of our hour. Please email me with your questions if you want them to be answered. I promise to respond to you within 24 hours. Again, my name is Roger Grimes, and my email is rogerg@knowbefore.com. And thanks, everybody, for putting up with me and my fast talking for an hour.